Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Dr. Korachi, and in this video lecture we will cover exploitation methods and tools. Now, by the end of this module, you will learn about the methods and the tools used in the exploitation and post-exploitation process. You will learn about how to select targets for exploitation. You will learn about different exploitation frameworks and their capabilities, and you will learn about common exploits executed against a target. And then you will learn about post-exploitation methods and tools. You'll learn about persistence and how to maintain persistence. And finally, we will discuss pivoting, evading, and cleanup methods and requirements. Now, before we proceed with the video lecture, okay, we need to learn about certain key terms, like exploitation means it involves using vulnerabilities to compromise systems and gain unauthorized access. And when we talk about exploit framework, like Metasploit, we know it's a set of tools and code used to automate exploitation. Now, when you run vulnerability scanning like Nessus, for example, you know you'll be able to identify potential targets on the network, like bunch of targets and their exploitation, and different type of system with the most critical vulnerabilities are frequently targeted, as you're aware, for attacks. So therefore, severity ranking, as you see over here, like for this particular target, okay, it's very important, and you should take into consideration when selecting exploitation targets here. Like we have a bunch of targets, the target with the most serious exploitation, that's the one you need to focus on. Now, severity ranking of vulnerabilities are very important when you look at here, the vulnerabilities here consideration when selecting the one. Now, why this is important here? Okay, well, because severity ranking for vulnerabilities are critical for resources prioritization, especially when time, tools, and expertise are limited. So, as a pen tester, you must focus on the vulnerabilities that deliver the most significant impact with the minimum efforts here. Now, another thing here is that you need to remember is that vulnerabilities that categorize as high, as you see it over here, or critical, the 10 in the red colors here, uh, typically enable privilege escalation, full system compromise, or access to sensitive data like credentials, could be like database or system controls, which should be taken very seriously. So another thing here, the severity ranking, it's it's also influenced the availability and the ease of exploitation. The fact is, high severity vulnerabilities are more likely to have publicly available exploit, such as CVE-based payloads, like in tools like Metasploit, okay, which means it simplified the exploitation process, makes it easy to do it because it's already there. We know how to run Metasploit. We know what steps needs to be done. So it makes it so easy for us to exploit, you know. So therefore, it has to be taken seriously. Now, we will look at enumeration information, and we know that enumeration, it's a very important step, for, during information gathering phase. We collect a lot of comprehensive details. We will collect information about user accounts, group domain, installed application, operating system. We might come across sensitive data or come across unencrypted files. Now, let's look at the first one when we talk about user accounts here. Now, a valid user accounts play a crucial role in authentication process and facilitate credential-based exploit. So therefore, the attackers will always focus on discovering real, okay, user accounts, because they could leverage these accounts to gain access to system bypassing standard security controls. Now, a valid user accounts list can be built on many ways. The first one here, Guessing usernames and password manually involve attackers trying common credential or patterns. Brute force tools can automate the guessing process for us, which means it allows attackers to test thousands or combinations quickly. The OS intelligence here, open source intelligence, is used to collect email addresses or user names or any public information which can assist in learning more about the target and execute social engineering attacks. Harvesting information from Active Directory on Windows system also, that's another important thing. And finally, extracting Linux system users from this folder here, right here. Okay, this file contains user account information, which is, something we'll always look for. Now, for groups, enumerating groups, okay, it's very important because it help us identify groups where members can be added or manipulated. Now this helps attackers escalate privileges by targeting groups with admin level permission. That's the most important thing for attacker, because obviously any user with administrator account, they have high privilege, okay, which means, attacker can gain access to more things. So group information can be enumerated in multiple ways. In Linux, from this particular folder right here, for Windows domain, group information can be found either locally or within the Active Directory, obviously, for domain environment. And PowerShell commands also can, if the attacker able to access the PowerShell and run PowerShell commands, they can query and retrieve uh, like a group related information, making it, a very, very preferred. Actually, it's the preferred methods for enumeration in Windows environment here. Now, for sensitive data, only should be accessible by authorized individual or accounts, obviously. Now, it may include, any sensitive data may include, security information, intellectual property, personally identifiable information. And so therefore, pen tester will always check for sensitive data, and you want to make sure that it is encrypted, and of course, this is part of PCI DSS and other regulations which require these type of sensitive data to be protected properly. Now, for installed application and operating system, this is very important here, and that's why we need to understand the target's operating system, OS. This is because this is very critical in cybersecurity. It basically provides us the foundational details necessary for uncovering and exploiting vulnerabilities. Now, why this is important here? Now, first of all, target OS reveals potential weakness. Okay, or well, like tools like Nmap or Metasploit can help us uncover details about OS versions, patch levels, and open ports, and so on, which enabling attackers to identify exploits, relevant to this particular operating system, which take us to say that there are many exploits out there, and many of them are typically OS specific. Like exploit for Windows is different than Linux. Even the exploit for Windows 10 is different than 11. Okay, so application running on a target are also keys to selecting exploit to try. Of course, there's no server standalone by itself. So any server will have like web servers, like Apache, IIS. They will have it could be like database server running on the top of the operating system. It could have MySQL, Oracle, and some other common software. So therefore, each one of these, they have their own set of vulnerabilities that the attacker would try to exploit here. Okay, so this information leads to what? Well, it leads to precision in exploitation. So by knowing the operating system, the attackers can tailor their technique, whatever, attack they want to avoid failure or detection. They will design their attacks according to the information that has been collected about the operating system and the application running. And obviously, choosing exploit, I mean, each attacker will focus on the most critical and high vulnerabilities, the one in red, if you recall the screenshot taken for Nessus, you know, and of course the vulnerabilities with the non-exploit code, and this basically, will save effort for the pen tester. Now, there are so many database out there, and that's one of the things I strongly recommend to become familiar with. Like one of those databases coming from exploit database, and here's the link for it. And that's one of the websites with many resources that I strongly recommend to visit and become familiar with. And here's also, we have another website for Rapid7 vulnerability and exploit database. You type in, for example, like Apache, and will list for you the type of vulnerabilities available for it. And by the way, Rapid7, they are the makers of Metasploit family of security and exploit software. And their database is fully integrated with Metasploit framework, and it's very important and very useful. We have also the VulDB, which is a crowdsourced vulnerability database. That's another website that, it's good to become familiar with it as well. And finally, we have the NIST, which is the National Vulnerabilities Database, and here's the link. And that's also another important website for you to become familiar with. Now, in this section here, we will focus on exploit frameworks. And before we get into this, I want to go over the steps to exploit a vulnerability. The first step is you attempt to connect to the target using a discover vulnerability. Like utilize, identify weakness, like outdated software, misconfiguration, weak security settings to initiate a connection with the target. Second step here, you provide expected input and the responses to the target so that the connection is accepted, which means that you try to mimic legitimate inputs or requests that the target system expects, often bypassing security mechanism or fooling the system into granting access. Number three, you try to provide or circumvent login or credential requirements. You could supply like either a valid credential, you got it through brute force or password spraying or stolen credential, or you try to exploit vulnerabilities to bypass authentication altogether here. Number four, once connected, upload a new program or task so that the session is eventually rejected. If the session is eventually rejected, the connection can be more easily reestablished. How this can be done? Simply by deploying backdoors, persistent tools, or reverse shells. This will help you to regain the session, after termination. Now, perform reconnaissance. Obviously, when inside the system, you try to gather as much as information as possible about the system itself, about the network topology, operating system versions, services running, user roles, etc. And then you gather information like collect critical data such as files, user credentials, security configuration, system logs to identify further attack vectors or valuable assets. And then here, okay, again, you try to provide or circumvent login or credential requirements. Again, like if a new connection barriers arise, like privilege escalation steps, you want to try to bypass or provide credentials to achieve higher privileges or deeper access into the network, since this target is part of the network. Now, you take steps to hide your presence on the target, obviously, by erasing logs, clear command histories, disable alerts, or use rootkits, anti-forensics tools to avoid detection. And finally, you want to do cleanup when you are finished, which means you have to remove anything you already installed, like remove tools, backdoors, any traces of exploitation to avoid post-incident detection, or obviously forensics analysis. Now, there are so many frameworks out there. Okay, we're gonna talk about Metasploit framework, and this one has so many modules. We're gonna discuss it, and it's created by Rapid7, a cybersecurity company offering pen testing, cloud security, vulnerability management, threat intelligence. Now, addition to this, there are two VMware tools you could download it. Metasploitable 2, Metasploitable 3. Now, 2, it's a lightweight, pre-built VM based on Ubuntu Linux 8 that focus on older, well-known vulnerabilities like weak configuration and outdated services. It is beginners friendly, very easy to set up, and ideal for learning basic exploitation techniques, like service enumeration and simple attacks. Now, after you feel that you master things within 2, you could jump into Metasploitable 3, which is simulate more real-world scenarios, offering both, Windows Server 2008 R2 and Ubuntu 14.04 environments with modern vulnerabilities, including privilege escalation, misconfiguration, post-exploitation challenges. It requires manual setup using tools and making it resource intensive, especially if you use the Windows Server version, but better suited for intermediate to advanced users. You know, so think about it this way: the exploitable tool good for a beginner, and ideal for foundational learning. Number three, provides a more complex and realistic training ground for advanced penetration testing. Now, okay, so of course, they have, this company, Rapid7, they have their Metasploit Pro, which is a commercial version with enhanced feature. Now, if you want to learn about, you know, main features, which is I'm going to talk about it, but or some commands used in Metasploit framework, and also you will learn how to use those commands here to exploit vulnerability. I encourage you to watch this video. Now, let's focus on Metasploit framework. Now, where, by default, you can find it inside this particular folder right here sitting on the screen. At the high level, Metasploit can be visualized as, based on these type of modules here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modules. We're going to talk about most of them. Okay. And, just to know that these modules, each one of them has a purpose. Okay. Which is, we're going to talk about it soon. Now, the first thing here, we have auxiliary modules, which support functionalities like scanning, fuzzing, and sniffing. For example, if you want to check whether a particular FTP server allows anonymous access, or if your web server is vulnerable to a heartbleed attack, so that's one of the things you could hear. See this for example, this example here, you could use auxiliary scanner SSL, open SSL underscore heartbeat. Okay, you could use this to check if the web server is vulnerable. Obviously, there are more than 1,000 auxiliary modules. They're classified into 19 categories. And I can't go over each one of those categories, but for example, like admin here, it has tools related to system administration tasks. You got the crawler. For example, it has automated tools to scan and extract data from websites. You got the fuzzers right here with tools for automated testing to find application vulnerability. So, and of course, we got the scanner tools for network or system vulnerability scanning. And you can see it here, like scan a port scan, for example, like acknowledge scan, FTP bounce scan, sync scan, and XMAS scan, TCP scan, and so on. It has so many type of scanners out there, and there's a lot to learn, by the way, from Metasploit framework. Now, the other module is called the payloads. That's the code that runs after you successfully exploited vulnerabilities in a target system, which means that you gain control of the system. It happens with, start with opening a shell or deploying a malware. Like, for example, if you want to create a reverse shell back to your system, which means this will help you to run several commands inside the virtual machine. So you could simply do that by running this appropriate code right here. Windows reverse, sorry, meterpreter reverse underscore TCP, and this will open a session as you see it over here. Basically, this will create reverse shell. Also, you could create a reverse shell using MSF Venom, which is we'll discuss it later on. Dash P for the payload, and here this is the shell reverse TCP. That's uh, which basically will help you to open a session back to your Kali Linux system. Okay, and there's the local host IP addresses, local port to which port you want version to connect to. Dash F mean the format .exe, which means it will create .exe output like you see it over here. Of course, you have to rename it, and in a way that is not obvious to average user to realize that there's something wrong here. Uh, Also, you got the exploits. That's another module which offers exploit for various vulnerabilities that will be executed to exploit the vulnerability. For example, Metasploit has more than 18,000 exploits, like in 17 categories here. Like, for example, you have the Windows exploit for RDP, for example, remote desktop protocol. So, simply like if you decide to find what type of vulnerabilities relate to RDP, simply type RDP with the full directory as you see it over here. Okay, locate exploits, Windows, RDP, and you see a bunch of them that are part of the Metasploit framework database. Now we have encoders. Now, these are used to obfuscate payloads, helping them to evade detection. Now, it uses, by the way, various techniques and algorithms to obfuscate the payload so that it does not get detected by anti-virus software. Now, there are many, many types of encoders here. Like, for example, you have this thing called x86 Shakata, GANAR. This is a polymorphic encoder that uses XOR encoding to obfuscate payloads. It's cost. It uses against static antivirus signature detection. It could work very, very, very well. Now, with the help of MSF Venom dash P for the type of payload here, and this is I already described it to you. Okay, here dash E, here you select the encoder as the one I just mentioned up here, and dash I mean iterates the encoding process like 5 times. Obviously, do not do it a lot, otherwise it might not work. And the format exe file, and the output will look like this. Dash O for output here. You know, just before we move forward, there are different type of encoders. Like one of them, for example, PHP/base64, which encodes payloads in the base64 format for PHP environments. Very effective for bypassing basic input validation. Of course, you got the PowerShell. base 64, which encodes payload in the base 64 format for PowerShell commands. Okay, so there are plenty here, so I think it's a good idea for you to learn about these. Now, for post-exploitation modules, after gaining access, you want to start doing more exploration and exploitation of the system, like, harvesting credentials. One of the things you could do with these modules that are applicable to different type of system, you see it over here. You could like escalating user privileges to root or administrator, retrieving system credentials. You could, for example, like try to steal cookies and saved credentials. You could try to capture keystrokes, like you see here over here. There's a keylog recorder, okay, which captures any key you type in on a target, like Windows system, for example. If you want to use Windows, right here, see that Windows key log recorder. So this will target Windows system, will capture every key the user type inside it, you know. And of course, like if you want to learn more about running Meterpreter commands, which is something I'm going to discuss it next page, okay, after you exploit the vulnerability, and what type of commands can be run inside the victim machine. This video will give you brief idea about several commands here. Okay, so Meterpreter, it's very advanced payload. It's part of Metasploit framework. It's an interactive shell runs in the memory after exploitation to control and manipulate the target system. It's considered post-exploitation. Okay, used during, after you gain access to the system, you will use it here. So basically, you want to interact with the target. You want to do escalate privileges. You want to gather information. You want to maintain access. So, for example, you could see these command right here, sysinfo. Like if all these commands, you see it over here, you run it inside the target. Once you are inside the target, you exploit the vulnerabilities. You have you created a reverse shell. Now you have a shell directly inside the system. You can run these commands. You see it on the screen, like shell. Open a standard shell on the target system. You can take a screenshot, capture the screen of the target system. You could like do a key scan, start capturing keystrokes on the target. You could dump those keystrokes after you capture it. And obviously there are way more commands there, I'm not gonna go over each one of them, but I think it's very important for you to become familiar with at least some of these commands here. Okay, because it's very important for you to become familiar with the Meterpreter commands. Now, before you start playing around with Metasploit framework, I strongly recommend to do an update to Kali Linux. I mean, notice this before the update 2420. Now this is 2461. Okay, that's at the time of the recording. So make sure you do update and upgrade to the Kali Linux. Now, this will conclude the Metasploit framework. Let's talk about other type of exploit framework, which is PowerSploit. Now, this is post-exploitation framework that consists of collection of PowerShell scripts. Okay, so this is targeted for Windows environment, which is designed for pen tester and red teamers, to use it against Windows. It has so many tools inside here. If you could see here, like tools for reconnaissance, exploitation, persistence, and data exfiltration during the post-exploitation activities. Now we have the Empire. That's another open source, very powerful also, designed for red teaming, pen testing, offensive security operations. It has PowerShell and Python-based agent for post-exploitation activities, which gives you, whether you are a pen tester or attacker, Enables all of you to gain control over compromised system, execute commands, escalate privilege, and maintain persistence in the operating system environment. Okay, so in this section, we're going to talk about common exploits. Now, by all means, this is not an exhaustive list of common vulnerabilities, okay, but we will cover the most important thing. The first one, we talk about remote procedure call distributed component object model. Now, this is, by the way, a window client server communication model that enables client basically to send requests and execute functions on the remote servers, easily. Now, the problem with this mechanism, while efficient for distributed computing, it poses a significant vulnerability if improperly secured. Now, a successful exploit of this type of remote procedure can allow an attacker to achieve remote code execution here on a target system, providing the ability to run arbitrary commands, install malware, or even gain unauthorized control over the compromised machine. Now we have another one here. This is a tool, PSX. Now, this is a Windows sysinternals tool. It's called Windows sysinternals tool. It facilitates remote execution of program on the target system. It relies primarily on port 445 of TCP and uses, of course, the SMB protocol, okay, for communication. Now, itself, it's a legitimate administrative tool. No issues with this. However, the problem here when attackers often exploit it for literal movement within the network. In fact, there is modified version of it can include Metasploit payload, enabling malicious activities, such as deploying malware, establishing, persistent access on the target system. Now, here I have also another one. It's called fileless malware. Now the fileless malware refers to type of malicious software that avoids being stored on a target system disk. It just basically it stays on the memory in order to not to be detected by antivirus solution. So now when it's in the memory, it allowing it to bypass traditional detection mechanism in many cases, not everything, obviously. By avoiding disk-based storage, fileless malware is highly evasive, making it challenging for conventional security tool to detect and mitigate. Now, there's another concept called living off the land here. This describes a technique where attackers use the native operating system tools and legitimate software to perform remote pen testing or malicious action, of course. Now, this approach basically minimizes the need for external tools, uh, kind of like reducing the chances of detection. Now, examples can be like if you want to execute PowerShell commands, leveraging file and process management utilities and using tools like Active Directory for network reconnaissance. So by blending in with normal administrative activity, attackers can stealthily perform tasks such as privilege escalation, data exfiltration, or remote execution. Now, another one, we're still with the living off the land, crack map X. Now, this is exploitation tool that illustrate, living off the land technique by leveraging basically Active Directory tools for malicious purposes. It is basically designed to streamline network reconnaissance and attacks within Windows environment. It can do a lot of things here. Like for example, it can do null sessions, which is mean anonymous connection to system to gather information, pass the hash, exploiting hashed credentials to authenticate without cracking password. It can do brute force and password spraying, attempts to guess password across multiple accounts within minimal detection. Can do also like data gathering, like collecting sensitive information such as user list shares, and also system configuration. Okay, so basically, by using legitimate tool and protocols, this tool enables attackers to blend in with regular administrative activity, making detection significantly more difficult. Now, there's another thing here. We have scheduled tasks. This basically exploit native operating system scheduling tools to maintain persistent access to a compromised system, basically. And like when it comes to Windows environment, attackers can leverage the scheduled task system right here in Windows and the cron jobs in Linux. Okay. Now these tasks basically can be configured to automatically reload a malicious payload at specific intervals, ensuring it persists even if detected and terminated by the target. Now, this stealthy method minimizes the need for attackers' intervention, enabling long-term access and control. The other issue here we have with the leaked keys. Now, this is a scenario where the target use key-based authentication here, such as SSH keys instead of the traditional username and a password. Now, for secure login. Now, if these keys are leaked or exposed for some reason or another through public resources like GitHub, shared repositories, or misconfigured system, they can provide attackers with unauthorized access to the target system. Okay, so using leaked keys, by the way, bypasses conventional login security, allowing seamless and stealthy access to, sensitive systems. Now, another one, we have the server message block, SMB. Okay, so this is platform independent as a protocol, and it's very powerful, and it uses for network-based services like file sharing, authentication, authorization, printer sharing, and name resolution here. Now, despite its extensive use, SMB vulnerabilities persist due to multiple protocol versions, like the 1, 2, and 3 still being used, especially the old ones still being used. That's what I meant. While SMB security has improved significantly from 1 to 3, the problem here, you still find open shares with no authentication requirements, and that's one of the common misconfiguration attackers exploit here. Now, there's a tool called Mpocket. That's a Python-based tool set, and it has a bunch of libraries for SMB attacks. It can do a lot of things, like the first one, SMB hash playback, which happens by it works by reusing capture and TLM hashes. Okay, and you got the WMI persistence. This one leverage Windows management instrumentation to maintain access. And you got MS SQL authentication, basically exploiting weak credentials to access SQL Server over SMB, replicating PSEX6. That's like using SMB to execute commands remotely without additional tools, and remote data dumping data. Okay. Now, for domain name, we're not going to talk about what is domain name, obviously, but I mean, we know that this is a critical network service that resolves domain names into IP addresses. Now, while system needs to resolve a domain name, like in case you ask it to access a website, it first checks the host file located in your computer, to see if the IP address of the domain you want to access is there. The problem here, the DNS is a common target of exploits. Very common, attackers would love to exploit domain name. One of the things they could do, they could modify the host file in the local computer with malicious IP address, okay, to compromise the target and direct it to a specific host. They could also like take over DNS server, by compromising it to provide bogus IP resolutions, leading users to malicious sites. There's also another thing here, they could like intercept DNS or DHCP requests by redirecting queries to a malicious server. Why? I mean, because they have malicious purposes here they want to do. And last but not least is the DOS attacks, with the purpose of disrupt name resolution, causing widespread service failure here. Another one, we have the remote desktop protocol. Okay, so this is Windows service. It basically, like if you use it, it enables you to have a remote access to a system through a GUI interface right here, simulating direct console access. Now, it allows remote control system, okay, using TCP UDP port 3389 for communication. This is widely used for remote administration, by the way. Now, the RDP traffic, if intercepted or improperly secured, can expose login credential or hashed password, enabling basically the attackers to gain unauthorized access. Now, for the virtual network computing VNC, now that's a platform independent tool which provides you with the remote access pretty much similar to RDP here. Okay. Basically you could use it to control the target system desktop interface. It's very, very famous tool, by the way. Now, the VNC is often exploited in penetration testing or attacks through tools, like Metasploit payloads. Now, the payload can be remotely executed to establish a VNC access on a target. This enables attackers basically to control your system and perform malicious actions while blending in as a legitimate users. Now, the secure shell SSH. Okay, so that's a very common protocol used for secure remote access to computer system. Uh, Basically, it's used like by many tools like PuTTY for command line access. It is powerful administrative tool that enables secure management of remote servers. Now, despite its security, there were some issues or vulnerabilities and exploit exist. Okay, could be like one of the things related to misconfiguration or weak credential or even flaw in SSH protocol, like using an old one, you know. Now, for network segment here and virtual local area network, now this is very important. I mean, every large network must be segmented to separate network from each other. Like if you want to separate like research and development department from other common department for security reasons. See, okay, so the problem here, VLANs, they use layer 2 segmentation, layer 3 devices Also, they use VLANs like, like routers when they connect VLAN to enable inter-segment communication. So attackers can use packet sniffing to gather information about the VLAN configuration. In some cases, obviously, if it's not properly secure, and target networks. One of those common attacks, you're looking at the screen here, the VLAN hopping, exploiting switch misconfigurations to move between VLANs. The other one, the double tagging, inserting two VLAN tags in packets to bypass the VLAN boundaries and redirect traffic to unauthorized destination. Now, these attacks basically are very serious because attackers can compromise network isolation, enabling attackers to move, literally, and access otherwise restrictive area here. Okay, so we finish about common exploits. Now let's talk about post-exploitation. I mean, one of the first things that, attackers will do, like for example, they try to attack passwords. Well, you know, we know the reason behind password attacks is to circumvent authentication, you know. Now, these attacks often rely on harvesting credential from compromised systems, either through malware or keyloggers or credential dumping tool. Okay, now attacker also may use like social engineering, like phishing or password dump leaked online as a source for valid credential. Common techniques, can be like, brute force attack, password spraying. Now, the password spraying, in case if you're not aware, it uses single or small set of common passwords across multiple accounts to avoid lockouts. And also we have the word list attacks, which means that attacker will use pre-compiled word lists available online to test, likely password candidates. And there are so many tools out there that can help you with the password attacks. Obviously, one of them is Hashcat, Hydra, and of course, John the Ripper, which is a very well-known password and hash cracking tool. It is designed to identify weak passwords through various attack methods. Pen testers widely use it to assess password strength and detect vulnerabilities. And the good thing about John the Ripper, that it supports multiple hash and encryption formats, like including Windows, NTLM, Unix-based passwords, and more complex encryption as well. Okay, so there's also another tool. It's called Mimikatz tool. This is a very powerful and widely used post-exploitation tool that extract credentials, hashes, and Kerberos tickets from memory of Windows system. Okay, so one of the source or one of the core capability of this tool is that as a credential dumping, it extract plain text password, NTLM hashes, from something they called LSASS.exe, which stands for Local Security Authority Subsystem Service Memory. So this is why it works directly from the memory and can also recover cached credentials and password hashes stored in compromised system. Now, concerning the hashes, it has something called pass the hash, which allows attackers to authenticate using stolen NTLM hashes without cracking cracking them. Now, this bypass password verification processes here. And obviously, we have the Kiraboris tickets, which it can generate, by the way, a forged ticket granting ticket using the domain's KRBTGT account hash. And this probably could provide long-term and stealthy access to the network here. Now, for privilege escalation here, which is this is a very important topic. I want to spend some time talking about it. This is the process by which attacker or pen tester increase their permissions and access level on the compromised system after gaining initial access, typically with standard user privileges. Oh, basically, the ultimate goal is to escalate to higher privileges such as, admin or root. Now, if you look here, we have vertical escalation, we have horizontal escalation. When we talk about the vertical escalation, it involves increasing the privilege to gain administrative or root level access. Okay, like for example, you want to exploit OS or Unix or Linux kernel to achieve elevated permissions. Now, the horizontal escalation involves accessing another user account or service at the same privilege level, not higher. Privilege means you go higher. Horizontal means in the same level here. Okay, so what are the common, targets for privilege escalation? Okay, well, one of them is the OS or the kernel here. Exploiting bugs or misconfiguration to gain root or admin privileges. You got also the databases as well, like exploiting database permissions or misconfiguration to gain administrative control. And of course, application and services, and this is where you try to exploit any sort of software vulnerabilities there. So in order for you to get inside. Now, what are the key factors leading to privilege escalation? There are many of them. Like one of them is poor security design, like for example, like weak permission models or missing controls, uh, misconfiguration, such as incorrect file or folder permission, unpatched vulnerabilities, credential reuse, weak or shared passwords among different accounts and services. So one of the things we recommend to do to mitigate privilege escalation risk is that any organization must implement regular patching, enforcing the principle of the least privilege, and monitor for unusual activity on endpoints and services here. Now, another one, we have data exfiltration. Uh, Data exfiltration is the process of assessing and extracting and transferring sensitive data from compromised system to attacker's control area. Okay, there are many standard sharing, protocols and app like FT, SSH that can be used to move data. Uh, Attackers often leverage these trusted methods to blend in with normal network traffic to basically to conceal itself. Uh, Obviously, also we have when it comes to data can be encrypted as well, or obfuscated before transfer to evade detection by something we call data loss prevention as well. And that's one of the things that the attacker try to hide itself. And if you're familiar with the steganography, also we know it's a technique used to or covert technique where data is embedded within non-suspicious files like images, audio, or video here. Now, one of the mitigation strategy is that you need to implement a system called DLP, data loss prevention tools, to monitor and block unauthorized transfer. You need to monitor your network to detect any any not normal traffic, basically. And you need to encrypt sensitive data. You need to train employees on the phishing and social engineering risk to prevent initial compromise. Now we have also cross compiling. Now, this is the process of taking like one source code or certain source code written for one platform or architecture and compiling it to run on a different platform or system architecture. This is very useful in exploit development, so the attackers basically can adopt these tools or exploits for use on various target systems. Example like creating malware that executes on multiple architecture like x86 or x64 or ARM or whatever. Now, in the last part of the post-exploitation, we have shell escape and upgrade. Now, shell escape and upgrade refers to techniques used by pen tester or even attackers to gain more control over a compromised system when initial command line access is restricted or limited. Now, these methods basically are common in the post-exploitation scenarios where the goal is basically to bypass limitation and escalate to a more functional or privileged shell, and that's here what they call it, like shell vulnerability mean escape a limited shell, which is called escaping. Okay, mean escape this shell. And of course, last but not least, the social engineering. We know that in social engineering attackers try to lure, manipulate victims into revealing some information from people. So it's basically exploiting people by by making them release information that in the normal circumstances they will not do it here. Now, for persistence, uh, persistence mean involves employing tools and methods to maintain access to compromised target host. Okay, for scheduled jobs and tasks, I already discussed this, but I want to jump into the NETD modules, which this is a service, by the way, in Linux system is used to manage and start network services. Any one of these services will act as a super server, listening for incoming network request and launching the appropriate services, like FTP, SSH, or HTTP, or as needed. Now, this can be exploited basically for backdoors, like attackers or pen tester can modify the NETD, they modify the configuration to add a malicious service. Now, this allows a backdoor to be installed and executed whenever there is a modified service is triggered here. Now, for daemons and services, now this involved modifying or corrupting legitimate processes to ensure malicious programs execute and maintain access to a compromised system even after reboot. Now, these techniques are commonly used in post-exploitation scenario for long term. Now, if you look here, these are typically hidden. The demons are hidden, making them an ideal for attackers to establish resistance against the target. And you could see these are some of the examples that can be used. Okay, now, what is the defense measures for this? Well, you need definitely to monitor system services. You need to regularly audit running services and daemons for anomalies. It's also a good idea to install file integrity monitoring on a specific important folders over there to detect unauthorized modification to service binaries or configuration files. Also, not to mention that you need to restrict privileges, limit user accounts, okay, and basically, you want to make sure that no user or can have more privilege than it should, and obviously you need to enable logging. And finally, and for the backdoor here, we have Metasploit. Metapeter payload can create a backdoor shell. There are many examples where you could create, backdoor using MSF, Venom. Okay, and you could also, like, if you had the technical knowledge, you could replace those traditional services with a version that have known vulnerabilities to exploit for persistent access. Like in case if they discover you, so you have another option here to get back into the system, you know. Now, creating accounts. Now, this is also part of persistence. You know, creating account is a technique where attackers establish long-term access to compromised systems by creating a new user account. This method is often stealthier than relying on compromised existing accounts because newly created accounts may, again, I stress on the word may, bypass monitoring and detection mechanism, especially if it was well obfuscated. Okay, so I mean, there are of course other options for persistence, but we can't cover everything here. Now, in the last section here, we're going to talk about pivoting, evading, and cleaning up. Pivoting, so it's a technique used by attackers or pen testers to leverage a compromised system as a bridge to explore, attack, and exploit other systems or network segments that would otherwise be inaccessible. So let me just give you like a quick example so you can understand the scenario behind this. Imagine that attacker compromised a web server in a DMZ, demilitarized zone. Okay, the attacker will use this compromised web server as a pivot to access internal systems such as Active Directory servers, database servers, like SQL. And of course, after this, you want to maintain persistence on the pivot host and escalate privilege for further attacks. So, pivoting is a critical post-exploitation technique that allows attackers to escalate the reach from a single foothold into a broader network, highlighting the need for strong network segmentation, monitoring, and detection controls. Now, let's take a look at this figure picture here. Try to understand, the whole picture here. Now, first of all, we have external public network. We have perimeter, DMZ, internal private network. Here we have the attacking machine. Now, if you look at the attacking machine, obviously it's going to be in a public network, now, attacker starts from external public network and try to target a system in the DMZ area here, bypassing the first firewall you're looking at. See, basically, the goal is to compromise one machine, like let's say, for example, like the C1, and use it as a pivot to to extend the attack. Now, so the first machine, the C1 here, has been compromised. So the attacker will use it as the initial pivot point for further attacks. Of course, the attacker will use tools like proxy chain or SSH tunneling, okay, to route the traffic through C1 to reach additional system within the DMZ. Now you could see right now from C1 they reach to C2. Okay, so after pivoting through C1, the attacker compromised the C2 right now. The attacker is here. Okay, so basically right now they have deeper access into the network, and they will try to get inside the private network here. Okay, so they will use C2, okay, as the next pivot point to bypass the second firewall you're looking at and access the internal private network, which is something we do not want. Unfortunately, right now, the attacker is inside the C3, and the attacker resides in the internal network. We could see that has been compromised, and the attacker, would potentially try to attack even more important system like database, internal servers, or Active Directory. Now, the last step here, we have evading and cleaning up. Now, evading and cleaning up is a process used by pen testers or threat actors to remove evidence of their activities on compromised systems and evade detection. When we think, I mean, this is also, by the way, another critical step in post-exploitation, because you want to ensure that there's a minimum traces are left behind, to conceal the compromise and the tools used. Now, the idea here is that eliminate any scripts, payloads, or tools uploaded to the target system. That's one of the things attackers will do during the exploitation. For example, they would try to, delete like binaries, shell scripts, configuration file used in the attack. So they want to cleaning up everything. They will also try to delete logs, just to be aware, logs are often the first place forensics team look for indicators of compromise. So they will delete logs entirely, like Windows event logs, Linux, files inside the log folder, you know, and so they try to remove any temporary files or directories. The attackers use it to execute commands, or they use it to hide tools as well. So all these are part of the cleanup. Now, there'll always be some obvious IOC indicators of compromise. You know, however, skilled attackers will always aim to leave no traces of their activities. This includes like even removing, for example, like user accounts, processes, or schedule persistent tasks. Full cleanup. But sometimes, they will end up with, for example, some of the IOC will remain, and some like ransomware screens, encrypted and locked files, registry changes, also, or suspicious network activity. Now, so what are the mitigation and measures you would recommend for organization to detect and prevent evasion and cleanup activities? So first of all, you need to enable audit logging. You need to monitor log files for any deletion activity, clearing or tampering attempts. It's a good idea to have centralized logging thanks to the SIM solution, which can store logs externally, preventing tampering. File integrity monitoring, where you need to monitor critical files, or folders. Also, like many systems, they will have behavior-based detection, which is, identify any suspicious pattern, like, clearing logs or modifying timestamps. And of course, endpoint detection and response, monitoring the endpoint system as well for any type of cleaning up or evading or modification and so on. So with this right now, we cover in this lecture a lot of topics. We learn about the methods, the tools used in exploitation and post-exploitation. We learn how to select targets for exploitation. We learn about different exploitation frameworks, and like Metasploit and other frameworks with their capabilities. We learn about common exploits. We identify post-exploitation methods and tools. We discuss persistence and how to maintain persistence, and discuss pivoting, evading, detection, and cleanup. And finally, I want to thank you all for watching this video lecture. I hope you find it useful. If yes, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And again, thank you so much for watching.